How did the events of 9/11 shape the way the U.S. approaches foreign policy today? The devastating attacks on September 11 left an indelible mark on global relations and security strategies. In the aftermath, the U.S. was forced to reevaluate its foreign policy, leading to a significant shift in its approach to international relations. The impact of 9/11 can still be felt today, with many arguing that it marked a turning point in modern history. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the world witnessed a drastic rise in terrorist activities. The U.S. responded with a series of military interventions, aiming to dismantle terrorist networks and bring those responsible to justice. This aggressive stance was accompanied by a sense of urgency, as the threat of further attacks loomed large. The war on terror had begun, and it would go on to define U.S. foreign policy for years to come. As the U.S. moved to assert its military dominance, it also began to reshape its relationships with other nations, often through the lens of counterterrorism cooperation. This new era of foreign policy was marked by a focus on security above all else. The consequences of this approach were far-reaching, leading to a profound impact on international relations. The U.S.-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, followed by the invasion of Iraq in 2003, marked a significant escalation in the war on terror. These conflicts were justified as necessary to eliminate terrorist safe havens and prevent future attacks. However, they also led to widespread instability, civilian casualties, and a destabilization of the region. The long-term effects of these interventions continue to be felt, with many arguing that they ultimately created more problems than they solved. As the U.S. became increasingly embroiled in conflicts abroad, its reputation as a global leader began to suffer. The international community grew wary of U.S. unilateralism, and the country's relationships with its allies began to fray. In the years that followed, the U.S. continued to grapple with the consequences of its actions. The rise of new terrorist groups, such as ISIS, and the resurgence of old foes, like the Taliban, underscored the ongoing nature of the threat. As the U.S. struggled to adapt to these new challenges, its foreign policy became increasingly mired in controversy. The use of drone strikes, mass surveillance, and enhanced interrogation techniques all sparked heated debates about the balance between security and human rights. Through it all, the U.S. continued to navigate a complex web of international relationships, often struggling to find a balance between its own interests and those of its allies. The withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan in 2021 marked a pivotal moment in the war on terror. After nearly 2 decades of conflict, the U.S. had finally acknowledged that its military presence was not the solution to the country's problems. This realization was a difficult one, as it forced the U.S. to confront the limitations of its power and the flaws in its approach. The lessons learned from this experience are still being digested, but they hold important implications for U.S. foreign policy moving forward. Most notably, they highlight the need for a more nuanced approach, one that balances military power with diplomacy and development. One of the most significant takeaways from the post-9/11 era is the importance of addressing the root causes of conflict. Military might can only go so far in stabilizing a region. It is diplomacy, economic development, and cultural understanding that ultimately hold the key to lasting peace. As the U.S. looks to the future, it must acknowledge its past mistakes and adjust its approach accordingly. This will require a more humble and collaborative approach, one that recognizes the limitations of U.S. power and the importance of working with others. What are your thoughts on the impact of 9/11 on U.S. foreign policy? Let us know in the comments below.